This episode of the Gegenpressing podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our 200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and shares of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on our game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. We mentioned Bochum and Stefan. We all thought Bochum might get 3 points on Friday. They caught Borussia Dortmund completely flat-footed. Completely. I think that was one of the worst starting performances we've seen from Dortmund, on the backs of a game against Stuttgart where they were completely outplayed as well. And, you know, to be honest with you, after Matus Bero made it 1-0 and then Dari Veth made it 2-0, they had another chance that they missed. And I'm just looking at, here it is, Bodo going one-on-one with Kobel and then putting the ball just wide. And I honestly think Bochum make it 3-0 there. It's game over, right? Guirassy then makes it 2-1 just before halftime and gives Dortmund enough room to overturn this match. But I don't know. Bodo makes it 3-0 there. I don't think Dortmund is coming back. And that is a huge concern for Nuri Sahin. You know, at the end of the day, they beat their local rivals, the Ruhrpott rival 4-2. Everything is happy. You know, you saw the faces around the stadium at the end of the game that everyone was celebrating. And but I don't know, those first 44 minutes before Guirassy made it 2-1, they kind of burned into my skull. And I just think this wasn't good enough by Dortmund at all.
Yeah, we really needed a statement performance from them after that Stuttgart game. You know, Nuri Sahin said after that match that he never wanted to see a performance like that ever again. And then we turn to this next game, and suddenly it's 2-0 to Bochum. And, you know, Emre Can was interviewed after the game. He said nobody had any idea what was going on the pitch at that point. And you're like, well, wow, that is the problem, you know. And I think it's the first goal that, it's the first goal that if you actually watch it back, and keep an eye on Niklas Süle, I think that sums up just about everything that's wrong with Dortmund right now, to be perfectly honest with you. He kind of it's basically like a 3-on-3, I think, and he just kind of wobbles between the two of his teammates, doesn't know what to do. He charges at the wrong time, he gets caught out. And, you know, it's an outstanding finish, and, you know, it's a great goal for Bochum, but it just kind of shows that the Dortmund defence, again, after we saw in that Stuttgart game where they just looked like a dazed boxer for the entire 90 minutes, they're just all over the place. And, you know, we talked about this a lot. I've had a penny for every time I've used this to describe Dortmund performance, but it just kind of feels like it's just vibes. You know, it's just vibes. There's no tactics, there's no system, there's no what we talked about with Leverkusen, there's no discipline in this team. It's just 11 guys on the pitch doing what they can to win a football match. And I guess in a derby like this against Bochum, where the fans are frothing at the mouth on the sidelines at each other, then, you know, sometimes you can turn it around and kind of walk away with 3 points and say, well, you know, job done, we'll get on to the next one. Yeah. But it just reminded me far too much of that win over Heidenheim a few weeks ago, leading up to the Stuttgart game, where I said, you know, Dortmund could be happy with the win, they could be happy with the attacking performances, but Heidenheim showed that there's a huge amount of problems in this team. A lot of clubs have shown there's a huge amount of problems in this team. Club Brugge, who didn't even score a goal against them in the Champions League, showed there's a lot of problems in his defence in this team. And then Stuttgart came along, a very good team, and made very short work of Dortmund. And I'm absolutely not surprised that Bochum, despite the poor start that they've had this season, probably walked into the Westfalenstadion on Friday and said, we fancy about this. There's no reason why we shouldn't also test this backline. And they did it. And as you said, they scored 2 goals. One with relative ease, 2, catching Gregor Kobel out with possession, which is obviously not something that happens all the time. So maybe a little lucky there, but then as you said, they could quite easily score a 3rd goal. And it's just setting off alarm bells in my head. I don't want to be too negative about Dortmund, and I do have some positive things to say about them, which I will in a moment after I let you back in after I catch a breath here. But it just feels like what we saw in those predecessors, in a sense, where it is just there's no clear system, there's no clear tactics. It doesn't really seem like the midfield, attack, and defense are playing as one unit. It feels like the attack know what they're doing. Feels like the midfield are okay, maybe a little more, have a little more going about them this season because they got Pascal Gross in there. But the defense is still the same old faces. It's the same players who are very good at certain things, but very poor at others. And there's too many compromises, I think, in that back line. And it's a shame because it feels like Dortmund always takes two steps forward and one step back, where when their rivals in the Bundesliga are kind of outpacing them. Having said that, they're only 3 points behind Bayern Munich, so riddle me that. Yep. I've got no idea how that works.
That's because Bayern and Leverkusen did us all a favor by dropping 2 points, keeping it tight, keeping other teams like Stuttgart and Dortmund in it. And I think there was to go back to the actual game. I thought there was one really fascinating moment in the first half where the camera kind of zeroed in on Edin Terzic sitting in the stands with a piece of paper. I think he switched to a beer in the second half, which is probably good because here was his successor struggling on the field, getting totally dissected by VfL Bochum, and Edin Terzic is in the stands. God knows what he was doing there. I mean, he lives in Dortmund. He's a Dortmund fan and all that. But we all know what goes on with one of the big German clubs when one of the coaches that is sort of been in the conversation shows up, right? I mean, remember like just all the talk that when Julian Nagelsmann coached in a red jacket once, and what that meant. And it's everything is under the microscope, and here's Edin Terzic on the stands, and and Dortmund are struggling, and the cause for the head coach and all that sort of stuff. I just moments away. I mean, we had one of the questions for the previous show was, is there ever going to be a Dortmund coach who's not going to be under pressure after 4 games? I'm like, well, no, unfortunately, I don't think so, and the problem here is we still don't actually know what Nuri Sahin's football is like, right? We still haven't really quite figured it out. I think we now know that he would like to borrow the ideas that have made Bayer Leverkusen and VfB Stuttgart successful. And I think the way that they have targeted the players and signed them alludes to that as well, right? I mean, they took Stuttgart's defender Anton to help with it. They took Maxi Bayer to sort of copy what Undav did for Sergio Guirassy last year. Pascal Gross comes in to maybe play a little bit like of that Angelo Stiller kind of style, right? So I think all those pieces are there. And, there was quite a few comments about Pascal Gross and that he, quote unquote, slows the game down. I mean, in fairness, he did create almost all of Borussia Dortmund's chances. And, Sergio Guirassy also, in fairness, has been scoring a lot of goals. He is on pace of not maybe matching it, but being on a higher goal scoring rate than he was ever before that Stuttgart season that he had last year, right? So, those pieces always seem to be working out, but I think there's still some other parts in the squad that sometimes hold this club down. The reason I think why Pascal Gross looks slow, and he is not a fast player, that's not his job. His job is not to be a box-to-box midfielder. That's not why they bought him. His job is to be like Toni Kroos or Alexander Pavlovic, right? He's a midfielder who distributes the ball, creates chances, but he's not going to sprint from one end of the field to the other. That player is Emre Can, or is supposed to be Emre Can. And I don't think Emre Can has it. If for Pascal Gross to be the player that he was at Brighton, or to emulate what Angelo Stiller does for Stuttgart, you need to have the right pieces around him, right? And I don't think that process is completely finished yet. And I don't think Nuri Sahin has a full-on idea on how to actually play that sort of system. And so, he can talk, Dortmund can point out, and he can have had PowerPoint presentations about the style of football that he wants to play with Borussia Dortmund. The problem is we still haven't seen it yet. And I think, we see it at times. We see Pascal Gross creating lots of chances for Sergio Guirassy, who then scores them. We see, I think there has been some improvement with some other players. Adeyemi, I think, looks better this year than he did last year. Although at points in the first half, I thought he cut a very frustrating figure. And so, it's just not whole yet. The entire thing doesn't feel like complete. And maybe we're still going to get there, right? And I think that is something that Nuri Sahin has to prove. The fact that the first 45 minutes, though, where everyone expected a huge reaction from the Stuttgart game, worked out the way they did, and the Dortmund fans rightfully booed this team off the pitch, is something that I think the entire club needs to be really concerned about.
Yeah, because, Sahin is always going to be on borrowed time until he's proved himself to be a competent and capable head coach at Borussia Dortmund. I thought it was quite, you're absolutely spot on in the way that, they've signed Guirassy, and yes, he scored goals, and they've signed Anton, and yes, he's looked decent at times defensively one-on-one, but it's very Dortmund to just think they can sign these players from here and there, put them in a team, and then just bring in a completely novice head coach and assume that it will all work. And we talked about this on, maybe it was the last week's show, probably was when we were reviewing the Stuttgart game, but I don't understand how anyone at Dortmund doesn't look at that Stuttgart team from last season and think, well, it's not the individual players that took Stuttgart to the top four. It was the head coach who built that team and the system and the tactics and inspired the players to get to the top four. And you can take the individual parts away from it, but you can't rebuild that same magic without the head coach there. And I think that's something we are kind of learning with Nuri Sahin, because Dortmund do have an impressive squad. We've talked about this. They've got a really they've got a solid starting 11. They've got a huge amount of talent on the bench. We saw that in this game with the fact that Duranville came on and looked like an absolute world beater. We've seen it obviously with Gittins as well. Gittins coming on in multiple games and doing well. They've got a huge amount of pace. They've got a huge amount of attacking intent. They've got a lot of depth across the team, but there just doesn't seem to be any kind of coherent system between them all. So, we just kind of have to wait and see if Sahin can catch up with that, and he can implement a system and get his team working well, or if he can't. But I mean, you can compare these Dortmund performances to what we've seen from Bayern Munich so far, in the sense that, Bayern have played easier teams, but they look like they're playing under a new head coach who has come in and implemented a new system, who has come in with his own tactics and his own ideas, and who has convinced these players to do those things. And it doesn't feel like Sahin has done that with Dortmund. It still more or less feels like the exact same team under Edin Terzic, except instead of being in the touchline, Edin Terzic is sitting in the stands with a notebook, drawing doodles or God knows what. So it's a concern for Dortmund. But like I said, there were some positives I do want to talk about, and I think we kind of have to narrow it. You mentioned two of them, Guirassy and Adeyemi. I thought Guirassy was excellent in this game. The way that he just kind of scores that header, the first goal after Julian Brandt just kind of knocks it across to him, it must be so frustrating for Dortmund fans to see that, because they're like, yes, that's all you have to do. He's an excellent penalty box striker. He will outjump defenders. You have an outstanding playmaker in Julian Brandt. It's not complicated. Just give him the ball on the edge of the box, let him swing into the box. 9 out of 10 times Guirassy will get something on the end of it. It's not complicated. But yeah, I thought Guirassy was outstanding, and it's such a credit to him that the fact that he missed the first 2 games of the season. He's already got 3 goals in the Bundesliga, another one in the Champions League. He set up the penalty for this game as well. Why Emre Can, by the way, is still taking the penalties for this team is beyond me. I know he's very good, but come on. They've got so many attacking players. Oh, give me a break. Honest to God. Surely Guirassy, when he signed his contract, that would have been a clause in my contract from joining Dortmund. Like, no, I'm the striker. I'm the guy you signed because I scored so many goals last season. Part of that is that I'm going to take penalties. I know Guirassy, if I'm not mistaken, is not great at penalties, to be fair. But anyway, that still strikes me as quite odd. And the other one I wanted to point out is Adeyemi, as you mentioned. I thought he was outstanding in this game. He's already got a goal. He's got 3 assists. And it is quite telling that if you kind of look at his underlying stats, which I have in front of me, his expected assists have completely shot up this season from 0.18 last year to 0.64. His key passes per game in the Bundesliga were 0.79 last season, and now 2.59. Key pass being a pass that leads to a shot. from one of your teammates. And he's already got more goals and assists in the league this year than he did last season. So, we're talking about a player here who I think kind of has his mojo back. He's still not the finished product by any means. I saw a really kind of ridiculous rumor in the English papers this week saying that,
oh my God, I saw that.
Linking him to Liverpool, I think it was. I just thought they just do not want to. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Anyway, today it's it's the Mo Salah replacement, right? Yesterday it was Adeyemi, and today it's Pulisic.
Yeah, exactly. Funny what literally 4 or 5 games the Bundesliga can do. So yeah, I and look, maybe that's down to Nuri Sahin, so maybe he does deserve the credit for that. But I think Adeyemi's been outstanding. I think Guirassy's been outstanding. And I think I said this on Threads after the game, but it feels like a team that they're a very impressive attacking line, are more or less having to outscore their own defense in every game, and that's great for these individual players. But as we know, that doesn't really tend to work out for the head coaches on the sidelines. So look, at the end of the day, they've had a really tough start to the season. They've been far from outstanding performance-wise, but they're sitting 4th, if I'm not mistaken, at least as things stand before the Sunday games. And they're only 3 points off Bayern. So, things could be absolutely worse. But we're just kind of waiting for Nuri Sahin to really stamp his impression on this team, because it certainly hasn't happened yet. And it's why Bochum, Heidenheim, whoever else, continue to cause these upsets for Dortmund fans.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're recording this before the Sunday fixtures simply because, we figured we want to talk about those 3 games in particular. But Frankfurt with a win over Holstein Kiel could be second. So that's likely, I would say. But yeah, you know what? I think it is really interesting, how the table looks at the moment, and that Dortmund, despite a bit more of a wobbly start, is still fully in this, right? And I think that is maybe what you take at this stage of the season, considering especially that after that 5-1 thumping to VfB Stuttgart, who, by the way, I thought played really well again today. They were man down and they had really misfortune go against them against Wolfsburg, and yet they still somehow it was Dennis Undav, of course. Who else? Who pops up and scores his 4th goal in 5 Bundesliga games this season. It's just incredible strike rate for him. But the top of the table is extremely competitive this year, and Bayern Munich have now also dropped points, and I think that this is something that's going to happen. And in the long run, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you 5 match days and you have 10 points. And the top 4 all have dropped points now, right? And so if you Nuri Sahin, you essentially, it's not all been great, but at least the point total is there. I think that they were hoping for at this stage of the season, and they're still within a striking distance of all the clubs around them.
Yeah, and if Vasca has proven anything at Dortmund, it is that he only cares about where Dortmund finish on the league table, and as long as they're in the top 4, Nuri Sahin is safe. Yeah. And unfortunately, maybe that's a good thing, and it means he gets the time to try and build what he wants, but it could also prove to be a negative thing at the end of the season if they don't see any progress. But we'll have to wait to see, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. A really, really completely fascinating match day. Lots of teams dropping points, lots of results. I mean, the goal arena on Saturday was just absolute madness at time. I really have to give the DFL a shout out to bringing this to the audience in North America. And I don't know, do you guys have it in the UK yet too, Stefan?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a real shame. I think it's a really great way of watching a whole bunch of different games, and especially, on a match day like today where it just happened all at once. You have goals over there and goals there, and it was a really, really fascinating match day. So, yeah, it's been fun. Hopefully it continues. Champions League this upcoming week.